Greetings from ISSS here at the University of Pennsylvania. Before we begin, I would like to introduce today's panel. My name is Dr. Rudy Altamirano, Executive Director of ISSS and Executive Director of Immigration Services and Integration Programs. Joining me is Dr. Lily Zhang, our Director of Immigration Advising and Compliance, IT and Operations. I'm also pleased to have Donna Steinfeld, our Senior Associate Director for Advising Services, and Jeremy Spohr, our Associate Director of Client Services, who brings extensive experience. All of these panelists bring extensive expertise in advising international students and scholars. Together, we'll provide both the regulatory overview and the practical guidance you need. As well, we will be spending a lot of time answering questions that were posted in the registration portal. Next, please. But before we start, I want to provide a quick recap of the biggest changes. Under the current system, as I've said last week, most F1 and J1 students are admitted under duration of status, or what we call D/S. And under the final rule, D/S is replaced with a fixed expiration date on the I-94 known as the Admit Until Date, or AUD. This date generally determines how long you're authorized to remain in the United States with an initial admission of up to 4 years. If you need additional time to complete your program, you may need to apply for an extension of stay, or EOS, with USCIS, or depart the United States and re-enter. Another important change is that the F1 grace period is generally reduced from 60 days to 30 days, making early planning even more important. So before we go to the next slide, I want to say the key takeaway here is simple. Know your I-94 admit until date, plan ahead, and stay connected with ISSS. Next, please. The rule affects virtually every F1 and J1 population we serve, including dependents, and will also require Penn departments to plan further ahead. So it's not just limited to those international community, but schools and Penn departments will be impacted. Students and scholars will need to monitor, and the key word here is monitor, both your immigration documents and your I-94 expiration dates. Your I-20, your DS-2019, and now your I-94 expiration date. This represents a shift from a university-driven process to one that increasingly involves not just ISS as before, but also USCIS. Next, please. Before we go to questions, I would like to leave you with 3 final messages. First, while the final rule has been published, many implementation details are still evolving, and we expect additional guidance from DHS, USCIS, SEVP, and CBP in the coming weeks. Second, ISS is actively monitoring these developments every day and working closely with university leadership and campus partners to prepare Penn for implementation. As new information becomes available, we will communicate promptly through email, our website, FAQs, webinars, and other resources. And finally, please remember, as I've said last week, that you are not navigating these changes alone. Our commitment is to provide timely guidance, practical resources, and individualized support every step of the way. And we encourage you to continue monitoring your Penn email for updates from ISSS and to reach out whenever you have questions. This isn't the time to ignore our emails. Very, very critical. Now, next, please. We'll now move into the question and answer portion of today's webinar. We have organized the questions around the topics we've heard most frequently from students and scholars. And even if a question does not directly apply to your situation today, I encourage you to listen carefully to all of the responses. Many of these issues are interconnected, and hearing the broader discussion will help you develop a more complete understanding of how the final rule may affect you now and in the future. To help us cover as many questions as possible, I've asked our panelists to keep their responses as concise as possible while still providing complete and meaningful answers. And if we aren't able to address every question during today's session, please know that Penn ISSS will continue to update our website, FAQs, and other resources as additional guidance becomes available. And we're always here to support you through individual advising. With that, let's go on to the question. The first question that I will pose is to Lily. Let's begin with this, perhaps the most common question we have received from continuing students. Many students are wondering, what happens if they already have an I-94 that says duration of status or DS? Lily, can you help us understand what happens to current students after the final rule takes effect? So if the current I-94 says DS, what happens after September 15, 2026?
Okay. Thank you, Rudy, for setting the foundation and get us started on this very important Q&A. So for many students who currently have duration of status between now and September 15th, if you don't travel, then you're going to have DS associated with your I-94 record for the time being. But later on, after September 15th, if you go in and out of US, then the DS going to be replaced with AUD, admit until date. But you can say, oh, what if I don't travel? If you don't travel, you stay in US, you will still get a fixed AUD, but that will need to take into consideration how long your current program end date is based on your I-20 or DS 2019 plus the grace period. So it is an end date that ISS advisor will help you to figure out. Our advice to you is if you never travel, you have a DS for your I-94, don't assume that you can stay in US forever. You are still going to be constrained based on your program end date and no more than 4 years as the maximum plus the grace period. And the best way to figure out is to check with your ISS assigned advisor. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So basically, as Lily's saying, even though you have a DS, you will still have an AUD in the future. No one will escape that, and that will be determined if you work with your advisor. So Donna, now that we understand how current students may be affected, one of the next questions naturally becomes, what happens if additional time in the United States is needed? So Donna, could you walk us through the general extension of stay process under the final rule? What are the general processes for requesting an extension of stay or EOS for students?
Thank you, Rudy. So to request to someone who's going to need additional time beyond what is already granted, the first step is going to be, if it's additional time needed for the academic program, having extensions done on the I-20. If it's a J program, having the DS 2019 extended. And then with that extension, applying either for an extension of stay through USCIS, through an application process, or traveling before the AUD date is reached and returned with the extended document. Also, if someone is going to be needing more time for OPT, STEM OPT, academic training, that will, depending on the timing of that application, will also require an extension of stay. So getting the recommendation for the work authorization in the case of, let's say, OPT, and then also applying for an extension of stay.
Okay, thank you so much. So, Donna, are you able to talk about, because a lot of the students are asking about this transition window if they're applying for OPT before March 2027? If you don't mind
Sure.
commenting on that, because it's a little bit related to that, and
Mhm.
that's a nagging question also, and it's related. So,
Sure. So for individuals who retain the DS for the time being that do not have any travel, um, and keep their DS for the remainder of their program and are able to apply for OPT or STEM OPT before March 18th, 2027. So that is 6 months from the effective date of September 15th, 2026. It's referred to as a transition period. So if you're able to apply for OPT or STEM OPT within that window, and you have not traveled outside the US and still have your D/S, then you would not need to do an additional extension of stay application. You would just be applying for the OPT or STEM OPT.
thank you, Donna. So, Lily, I will ask you, then I'll go to Jeremy because this is interrelated. The biggest areas of interest, of course, is the OPT, right? So, Lily, many students have heard about a possible new filing requirement that Donna is alluding to. Can you explain when this will happen beyond the window and what is involved in terms of filing an I-Form 539 in addition to Form I-765?
Yeah. So for many students who is planning to graduate, we will kind of talk in terms of graduate in December 2026 or you graduate in May 2027 so that you can have more clear concept. If you never traveled and you're going to graduate in December, then you are well within the transition period that Donna just talked about. So if you apply in fall, then you only need to apply for 765 to do OPT application without the 539, the extension of stay. Now, if you're going to graduate in May, then the window typically going to happen in the middle of February, 90 days before your program end date, you're going to be eligible to apply for OPT. If you already traveled and you don't have DS anymore, then it doesn't make any difference to you. When you apply for OPT, you have to file for 539, the extension of stay at the same time, regardless. However, if you never traveled and you still have duration of status on your I-94, then you could take advantage for the transition period until March 18th, 2027. When you file your OPT before that deadline, then you only need to file for OPT application, the 765, without the 539 to file for the extension of stay. Because you file the 539, you're going to pay additional money, 500 and above. And also you have another application is waiting for the government to adjudicate. So there is added risk for the OPT application. Therefore, we emphasize if you're going to graduate in May, then pay attention, do the application earlier if you still have the duration of status benefit.
That's a very important thing to say, Lily, and I hope our students are listening to that because that is critical, so that you don't have to have the piling of the I-539 if you stay within that window. But of course, we need you to consult with your academic ISS advisor, okay? So that you are managing this expectation. So Jeremy, we'll talk quite a bit about F1 students. But we also have many scholars and postdoctoral researchers, okay, at Penn. And some of them might be joining us today. So, Jeremy, can you explain how these changes may affect our J1 research scholars and postdocs? For example, how does the 4-year limit affect J1 research scholars and postdoctoral researchers?
Thank you, Rudy. So for our J1s out there, who may be J1 students or J1 research scholars, J1 professors, let's talk a little bit about the research scholars. That is what most of our postdocs are. So you know that a research scholar is allowed to have a period of 5 years. But now we have this 4-year limit involved there. So for those of you that are currently a J1 scholar at Penn, and you maybe run it, your DS 2019 may be ending in the near future, we would recommend that you work with your department to see if it's possible that we extend your DS 2019 before September 15th. And I want to emphasize that this process must be led by your department. Just because you want to do this doesn't mean that you can. We would need a completed application for extension from your department. There would have to be funding, grant funding. Your PI would have to agree. So that's part of our situation for our research scholars. And
So yeah, continue. I'm sorry. Go for it.
yeah, no, I can stop there. Students will operate, J1 students will operate in a similar system to what Donna described, where they, instead of applying for OPT, they might be applying for academic training. That's their period of work permission. The process will be roughly the same as the OPT process for J1 students as well. The timing of are you DS or did you travel and you lost your DS? But
Okay.
the process would be the same for May graduates.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy.
Rudy.
So, yes, Lily, you want to add more to the Jeremy response? Go for it.
I think Jeremy basically explained very clearly in terms of what's going to happen if they are able to apply before September 15th. But we also want to emphasize, even if you couldn't extend before September 15th, it doesn't mean you cannot do it later. What Donna explained applied to students, similarly apply to J1 scholars as well. So it's just you're going to have an added step that you're going to either file with USCIS or you're going to do an entry. But if you miss the window, it doesn't mean you cannot to do program extension or extend your stay past September 15th.
Same thing for J1 students too. You can file for an extension of status if needed or travel.
Great. I hope that is very clear. Thank you for clarifying that, Lily. So another topic generating many questions is academic flexibility. Okay. Students often ask whether they will still be able to make changes to their academic plans after the final rule takes effect. So Donna, could you address that? For example, can students still change majors or academic programs? I know there's some differences in thing here, so go for it.
Yeah, so this is going to be a change once implemented that it will impact students that are under the graduate level, so our undergraduate students, differently than graduate and above. So for our undergraduate students, the first year of study, so while someone, let's say, is a freshman, will not have the ability to transfer to another school or change their educational objective, i.e. their major. So then after the first year is completed, undergraduates will have that option. For graduate students, they will not have the option of changing their major, their educational objective, or transferring to another school. And in both cases, unless there's very significant serious reasons that would extenuating circumstances, but the extenuating circumstances are more like a school closes, natural disaster, very high level of what may occur. Now, in regards to doing a change at education level or transferring to another school, it's always if you're going into a higher degree. So going from bachelor's to master's, master's to PhD. What you need to consider, there's going to be no possibility of reverse matriculation, no option to do lateral movements as well, like finishing one master's program and doing another master's. So, and no change again of a major during a course, during someone's studies. I don't know if
Thank you,
anyone has.
Donna.
Yeah.
That's very good. That's very good. I think that's very good to distinguish those. Lily, let's go to international travel.
Mhm.
International travel is always one of the most common concerns for our community. And so, Lily, can you explain what students should expect if they travel internationally after September 15? A lot of them are asking, if I travel internationally after September 15, will my I-94 change from DS to a fixed admit until date? What are the implications, the ramifications if that happens? Should I travel? Do you recommend I travel, or should I just stay put?
Mhm. Yeah, Rudy, you're right. International travel is a complicated matter, and sometimes it is deeply related to the student's individual case scenario. So, for instance, if a student's coming from the country that is on the 39 travel ban countries, we naturally will have more cautious that we typically will advise students to stay put. For students who have valid visa for a certain period of time, certainly you have a lot more freedom because you have a ticket that you are allowed to go in and out. If you are going to have expired visa, then please know every time that you leave US, when you come back, you have to have a valid visa so that they can let you in. We actually recently have a J1 scholar get stuck because she think have a valid DS 2019 is sufficient, but it is not. So have a valid visa is very important. Now, those are the general concept in terms of when you travel, what do you need to pay attention to? Now, the duration of status, the new rule added a new layer on top of that. How we interpret and impact your travel situation going to be like this. If you do have a valid visa and you can travel, you're not subject to any travel ban, then when you leave and come back, it is always allowable. The difference is when you travel after September 15th, then when you come back to US, the CBP officer going to give you a very clear admit until date. Because right now the students, often we ask you to check your I-94 and we emphasize, make sure you have a duration of status. But in the new case scenario, after September 15th, nobody going to get DS anymore. Everybody going to get a date. And for that particular date, what we want you to have in your mind is that day should match your I-20 program end date, ideally plus grace period as well, additional 30 days. But whether or not CBP officer going to accurately reflect that day, we don't know yet because we have not reached to September 15th. But that's the element that we want every student to pay close attention to. For instance, if you have an I-20 that is good until, let's say, May 2028, and you leave US, you come back October 1st, 2026, minimally, we want you to check that your admit until day will reflect the 2028 that date. But if the CBP officer made mistake, they somehow put down you as like 2027, that particular day still have very significant impact because it is true maybe the CBP officer made a mistake. However, once it's associated with your record on your I-94, it is your responsibility that you have to extend or exit out of US when you reached on the admit until day on your I-94. Therefore, every international travel become a significant event that we want all students, all J1 scholars to double check what is your granted admit until date. Also, on the ISS end, we're going to implement some system changes, and
Mhm.
we're going to require all students and scholars report your I-94 record every time you travel internationally. So back to you, Rudy.
That the last statement that Lily made is very critical. We're not adding more to your plate. The intention of ISS, why we're introducing that, is because we want to be partnering with you to make sure that you are not going to accrue unlawful presence. We're doing it for the benefit of our international students. So if we ask if you're asking something like that, report your I-94 date, don't 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 delay. Make it happen. Partner with us. Don't ignore emails. Make sure that you're always proactive and intentional because you want to succeed. Your goal is to finish your degree here at Penn. Your goal is to finish that research here at Penn. And if we're asking something like that, it's for your own good. Jeremy, in the same area, same vein of travel, international travel, what should J1 scholars and postdoctoral researchers know about traveling after the final rule takes effect? Uh, and they re-enter after September 15th. Do they have the same rules compared to the F1 counterparts and J1 student counterparts?
Yes, they do. The same rules will apply to J1s. So if you travel, if you're a current J1 holder, you probably have a DS on your I-94. But if you travel after September 15th, then you will get an odd date when you return, an admit until date. And you want to look at that very carefully. It will probably be till the end of your current DS 2019, whatever that is. And you may need to do an internal extension where we extend your DS 2019 and you take another trip, or you may need to apply for an extension of status. Or you may not, because you may be given enough time to complete your program, whatever that may be, depending on if it's within the 4-year window.
Limit.
So J1s, same thing. If we, send you an email and say, do this e-form so that ISSS can check your admit until date, don't ignore it, because we are trying to calculate carefully and be aware of what people's end dates are.
Very good. Great advice. Donna, I want to switch topics here. Here at Penn, we have a large doctoral population, and many PhD students are wondering how programs that extend beyond 4 years will be handled. Could you address that concern? What happens when a PhD program takes longer than 4 years? A lot of them are already wondering what that will be, not just the students, but also the schools. Yeah, go for it.
Sure. So if a program, and most PhD programs are going to go beyond the 4 years, there would be a couple steps that would be needed. So first, for individuals who do not travel at all, will have the DS until the I-20 or DS-20, let's say the end date on your document. If you travel, when you enter, you're going to have an admit until date as long as the I-20, but no more than 4 years, plus the 30-day grace period. So it will be something where if you have an admit until date that is shorter than your program length, then you will need to take the steps of whether it's an extension of stay or travel and reentry. If your I-20 requires an extension and you need to do more time, you need more time to complete your program, you're going to go through the normal process with ISSS. You're going to be submitting the extension e-form. Your academic school is going to be providing, approving that, indicating the expected length of your program for whatever academic reason. So it will need to show like some of the additional things will be being able to present the compelling reasons. Is an extension needed for, what are the academic reasons that require the extension? Was there a medical situation? Was there some type of reason that more time is needed for the program? So the academic reasons will be presented. Then again, whether it's going to be travel and come back with that new I-20 or filing for the extension of stay. So you'll be able to always, if complete the additional time should be possible to complete your program. It's just these additional steps, establishing the reasons, and also providing any updated financial documentation will be required when you get to those later steps.
So Donna, I have a question while you're
Mhm.
talking. Lily, you're about to say
Yeah.
something. Yeah, go for it.
So I think when Rudy asked that question, he had two angles. One is what the students or scholar need to do, also department. And I
Yeah.
think that is a very important thing that we wanted to explain, because many students always have the assumption if they need to do some extension, they only need to work with ISS, which is important. ISS going to play a very important role.
Correct.
However, when you're going to request your program extension, you're going to have the conversation start with your academic department. Now, in that regards, if we're focusing on PhD students, there is another component which is, very important, how department going to sponsor PhD student. Majority of the PhD students receive school funding or have some, scholarship, assistantship. Now, we wanted to make sure everyone understand from immigration point of view, when we extend your program end date, you need to have a valid reason to associate with your academic objective. At the same time, for instance, if you have a need that you're going to extend for one additional year for your PhD study, it doesn't mean your funding with the school is automatically extended. That is going to be controlled by your school. Sometimes schools are able to do the funding support for you. Sometimes they are not be able to. If they are able to, then this scenario is simple. Then you follow Donna's advice, you file those things properly, or you do leave and re-enter, then you're good. But if the department have no funding for you, and you still want to extend your stay in US, then it is your responsibility to show the financial support. You will need to show us the bank statement. You can have like personal funding from your family member, but you need to demonstrate that you have those financial means. And this go hand in hand with your academic need. As Donna explained, when later on you're going to file the program extension, in particular after September 15th, the extension itself going to go through ISS with the recommendation, but it's also going to go to the government. And you're going to show both ends. You're going to show there is an academic need. You're going to show that you have enough financial support that you can stay here for the extended time. When all those are demonstrated clearly, then you have a chance that you're going to be able to get approval, stay longer.
So Donna and Lily, since both of you responded to this question, I have a follow-up. So planning ahead will be especially important. We've been saying that for last webinar and this webinar. Very important under these new regulations. When should students begin thinking about the extension of stay process? Like, can I, for example, if my I-20 is expiring in April next year, can I apply now?
Mhm.
That's my, am I able to apply now because I don't want to worry about it? You know what I mean?
Mhm. Donna, you want to start?
Sure. Um, in that case, if it's something that you know you're going to need additional time and your I-20 currently doesn't cover that time, you can start that now. So if you're working first, working with your academic school, whether it's, your dissertation advisor, your chair, whoever makes those decisions as to, how long you need for your program, and looking at what is your anticipated end date. And you can do that extension at this point, and we can extend your I-20. Now, if we extend you and you don't travel, you're retaining the DS for at least
Mm-hmm.
4 years plus the
Mm-hmm.
60-day grace period, so till
Mm-hmm.
November 2030.
30. Mm-hmm.
And so, but if we extend you and you travel in, they're probably going to give you again up to the 4 years or the end of the I-20 plus the grace period, the 30-day grace period if you enter and come in. But if you want to get that I-20 extended now, we can do that and look at what, and again, any extension we're doing, and also just to mention any extensions that are done after September 15th in particular, has to have that documented reasons as to why. It can be whether it is, you know, your research, something changed in your research. You needed more time to pursue um, certain variables related to that. So there's going to be, reasons, in addition to your normal program, it, starts at least 5 years at a minimum. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that documentation is something, especially going forward, that is going to need to be, kind of ironed out. And a lot of support, what we would ask from the departments is more, instead of our e-form, we take the information that's given to us in, the certain reasons, but it's a lot of elaboration and documentation may be needed going forward.
Mhm.
Thank you. So Lily, can I now talk about OPT or STEM OPT
No,
again?
Rudy, I
Do
wanted
you want
to
to add
add
more?
on. I want
Okay.
to add on to,
Okay.
because you have asked a very important question, how
Mm-hmm.
early students can apply,
Yeah.
right? So in terms of the timeline, if you're going to apply before September 15th, because that's going to be still controlled by ISS,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if you're going to have the program good until May or April next year, you
Mm-hmm.
can submit the petition to us now. When we pass September 15th, when the extension going to be sent to the government, currently the rule does have the 6 months in advance, 6 months before the expiration, then you can submit the petition. However, we a little kind of worried to say if it is only 6 months, then from students' point of view, that is still a pretty tight timeline. And we also wanted to emphasize, although we're talking about the new rule, in the event the government agency or the congressional review result in modification of the implementation of the final rule, then some of the details that we talked about could still change. And
Mm-hmm.
we will carry the responsibility timely communicate with the community. But what I wanted to point it out is we need to be mindful once it is past the transition period, when we need to go through the USCIS for the filing, then there is a defined window.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Lily. So I'm going back to OPT or STEM OPT. Those who are now doing OPT and STEM OPT now.
Yeah,
Are those students who are already on OPT or STEM OPT, do they need to do anything immediately
yeah,
once
great
the
question.
September 15 happen?
Yeah, we already received a lot of students ask
Yeah.
such a question.
Yeah.
So if you already on OPT or STEM OPT
Yeah.
and you never traveled, the EAD card itself is not going to be impacted. So you're going to continue to use and do your job for the OPT and stamp OPT that you have been authorized. The thing that we always want you to be extra careful is, especially after the new rule, sometimes students like to just travel to Canada. Anytime that you leave US, go to Canada, go to adjacent islands, like sometimes students go to the cruise, those it's all considered you left US and it's going to get your I-94 updated. So if situation like that happen, then you need to be extra careful because then you can't just rely on the EAD card anymore and you have to double check your I-94 admit until date. So in a general simplified way, if you don't travel, I don't think for students on OPT or STEM OPT have anything to worry. But if you plan to travel, then consult with ISS first.
If this student is going to Puerto Rico, that's fine, correct?
Yeah, that's part of US territory.
It is part of the US territory, so they don't have to worry. Jeremy, I'll give Donna and Lily a little bit of a rest here. So one additional question from our scholar community concerns are those who are already well into their appointments. So what happens to a postdoctoral researcher who is already in their 4th or 5th year? They're already there, 4th and 5th year.
Then I really think that they need to work with their business administrator or their coordinator, whoever is handling the administrative part of their appointment, also with their PI. If they need, say if they're in, let's say they're 4th year now, and we want to extend their DS 2019 for a 5th year, which we can still do. The J1 program still allows 5 years for scholars. So they may want to consider that to make that extension before September 15th, if they're in that 4th year. That would be
they want to extend to 5th year, correct?
Yeah, to add up to a 5th year. So,
but if they're already in the 5th year, do they have to do anything? Do they have to worry about
if they're already in their 5th year, I mean, it'll depend what their end date is. If they don't travel, they will probably not need any extension.
But if they travel, they have to go to a conference, and they're already in the 5th year. What happens to their DS?
If they come in, let's say if they travel after September 15th, and they come back in and they get an odd date, an admit until date, it will probably be until the end of that 5th year plus 30 days. That will probably be their odd date.
Jeremy, thank you. Because some postdoctoral researcher might think, well, they might not allow me because I went beyond the maximum 4 years. You know what I mean?
No, that's not really the case. As long as you have a valid visa to re-enter, okay, that's piece 1. Do you have a valid visa or not for this trip? And then part 2, is your DS 2019 extended up to the 5-year max? So you would want to make sure that that extension has happened before you go on the trip. Right? You don't want to have a DS 2019 that's going to end too soon.
So, Rudy, if I understand your question correctly, if any postdoc are worried to say they already used 4 years,
and their 5th year
are
now,
they going
5
to
years.
be in trouble when they travel during the 5th year?
Yes, because they said 4 years max plus 30-day grace period, right?
Yeah. 4-year max is for each entry, each approval.
Okay.
When they exit and re-enter, then what Jeremy explained is they're going to inspect the DS 2019 again and see the program end date. If the program end date is in the future and it's valid for another year, then they're going to be grant that period to allow them to finish. If if they stay in US, they use the 4-year maximum inside the US, they will file the USCIS extension of stay to extend for the remaining 1 year. After the 5 year used up for the J1 category, then they will not be able to do any extension. That is still the same. So, but the rule itself will allow them to finish the period if it is allowable under that category. So
It will
what I
allow
want
them
to
to finish the 5th year
finish
if we do the extension.
the fifth
year.
year. Correct. Yeah.
The
One
fifth year.
thing that we wanted to explain so that all students and scholars understand is when we say there is 4 year maximum, it doesn't mean you can only just have one time 4 years. It's each entry, each approval, the
Is
4 year
another
is
4
the
years.
maximum. Yes.
Yeah.
But you
Yes.
every time that you leave, re-enter, every time that you file extension with the government will look at the reason why you extend. When it has legitimate reason, most likely they're going to approve. But you
Yeah.
need to go through extra step.
Yeah,
And
I
that is
asked this.
yeah.
Yeah, I asked those questions because those are very typical questions that are very, it's a concern in
And
their mind.
Rudy, can I put in a
Yeah.
quick plug to our department administrators that might be out there on this
Sure.
call? Okay, there's
Yeah.
250 of you here. So if there's some BAs or department administrators or faculty members out there, our J1 scholars are really going to need your assistance and your planning to help them track their timelines, possibly extend them. And this is going to need a lot of cooperation between the scholars, ISSS,
And the
and the
departments.
departments.
Yeah.
It can't be just the scholar coming and saying, I want to extend. Well, no, your department has to have the funding. They have to do the process. So department reps, be prepared to assist.
So yeah, that's a very good point, Jeremy, that this new rule, the final rule, is an institutional responsibility. It's a shared responsibility. It's not just an ISS, it's not just the scholars or the students. And departments, we thank you in advance as we look forward to partnering with you to make sure that our students and scholars are remaining compliant, but at the same time, as they navigate this new challenging landscape. So Lily, I want to go back to the OPT or STEM, and another practical question students have asked is whether the final rule changes when they should apply for OPT or the STEM OPT. When can I apply for an OPT extension? When should I apply for OPT? Is there any rule? Is the new rule affecting the timing of applications?
Yeah. Earlier, I kind of using December 2026 and May
Yeah.
2027
So you talk
as
about
an
that.
example, right?
Yep.
Because this are the window that it is still influenced by the transition period. Once we pass that period, in the future, what the students need to be pay attention to is if their subject that they're going to file for extension of stay, then they have to do the filing as soon as possible. Right now, students are allowed to file for their OPT 90 days prior to their program end date, which means for May graduate, they start to file in the middle of February. The current rule as is, they're allowed to file program extension 6 months before the program end date. So we recommend students to do those filing accordingly so that they have plenty of time to obtain approval. In our preliminary analysis, because once we pass the transition period, students will have 2 petitions pending for all the OPT applications. They're going to have an OPT for the 765 form, and they're going to have 539 for extension of stay. We don't want students to sit on them because if at certain time that those approval they didn't align together, then potentially they're going to influence each other. Therefore, it is very important that students consult with ISS and understand the window that it is allowable for them to file for those petition. The
Mhm.
other thing that we emphasizing for the window is in our past experience, sometimes students file, like for instance, they file for OPT. They unintentionally made some mistake. Just for the sake of discussion, they paid the wrong amount. And then they go through and then it gets rejected. If they're still in the application window that they can apply for OPT again, then the fix is easy. We will just issue I-20 again, and then they send in application again. Similar thing could happen when they file for extension of stay. Why we keep emphasizing you need to do those things earlier, just in case if you did something wrong, but then you're still in the period that you're allowed to file for extension, then we can help you to fix it. But if you pass that window, the decision for duration of stay adjudication is final. When it is final, you have no grace period. When it's denied, you have to leave. Therefore, the consequence is very severe. Therefore, we need to use as soon as possible for as long as possible to wait for the government's approval.
And just to add to that, just kind of going back to the timing, the timing for OPT itself that's not changing. It's still 90 days ahead that you can file that. The thing is with the extension of stay, they're going to be you're going to almost simultaneous in that you're applying for the OPT, getting that recommendation, the same as you're doing with us, applying for the OPT, but also doing the extension. You won't be able to do the extension of stay sooner than we can give you the OPT recommendation. So, for that process. And if you do have an admit until date, another consideration is the time frame where your OPT can start. For people retaining the DS and filing before March 18th, still have the 60-day grace period and that window for OPT to start. If you move into the AUD, excuse me, admit until date, you are going to have 30 days for your OPT within the 30-day grace period that your OPT can start. But the OPT, and that's why you're going to want to work with us closely as to what applications you need to file when, especially for anyone filing under the new rule and needing the extension of stay as well as the OPT.
Thank you.
The
Thank you.
other thing, yeah, Rudy, because you also asked about STEM OPT.
Yeah.
The other significance of filing on time is if they did proper filing and they need to do STEM OPT filing before the OPT expires, the current rule also allow them to continue to work for 180 days, which is like a good benefit. So that is another important aspect that students need to do timely filing always, all the time.
So Lily, you're still on the you're still talking. So I will ask you this a little bit of the ambiguity question. What aspects of the final rule are still awaiting federal guidance? Because I know we keep on saying it's not yet clear, we're still waiting, so that our students and our scholars and our departments are a little bit apprised. What aspects of the final rule are still awaiting federal guidance?
Well, there are many aspects that we're hoping that government will clarify in terms of when and how the students going to be allowed to transfer. Also, the rule as is provides very limited flexibility for students' mobility. So earlier, Donna talked about students will not be able to change their major. They will not be able to add a major. They will not be able to kind of, in a sense, drop a major either, right? Therefore, it is very kind of against the academic freedom, that spirit. We still wait to see if the government going to have any clarification in terms of what can be done. But as the rule stay as is, it is pretty rigid for all degrees and majors above graduate level. So when you are below graduate level, then you have the waiting period that you have to be in US for one full academic year. But afterwards, then you can still, change your major and pursue like some modification. At the graduate level, it is very kind of locked in, and we can't transfer you to any other school at the same level. If you're going to make changes, you can only go up, which means from master to PhD. So in that aspect, we're hoping the government agency going to take all those concerns into consideration and make some reasonable adjustment. But if the rule is going to be fully implemented as is, the language is clear, but it's just not very friendly.
Okay. This is I need to ask this question, and either the three of you can answer this. How might Penn's dual degree sub-matriculation programs and interdisciplinary academic pathways be affected by this? That's a very typical question of people.
We're going to be affected a lot. I think it is not going to have like one size fit all answer. For instance, if it is a program that it's from the very beginning that it's already dual degree based. For instance, if it's undergrads that we have the MNT program, which is a very famous program. The program is what the other program.
Donna, Lily is breaking. Do you mind? I think
Sure,
Lily,
sure. I think what Lily was going to mention, for example, the MNT program, and I think for any program that you're coming in, so if you want to have things updated from the beginning, what's the undergraduates though, if they're being admitted directly into a program, that can be updated from the start. If not, after year one, and a lot of times for the undergraduate side, can't declare a major anyway till after possibly the second year. So hopefully that won't be too much of an impact. But at the graduate level, it's going to be important that if things don't change or if the adjustments aren't made to the rule, that what major you plan to have and whether it's going to be a dual degree or not is from the onset, from the beginning, that you are having that planned out, making sure that we're aware of it, your documents reflect that. So because of the restriction of no changes later on. So that's going to be important to know. And then for things that are going up a degree level, then there's going to be hopefully allowances that are made clear for that. And one other thing to mention, I don't know whether we mentioned this before, anyone that's completing a degree before September 15th will retain the option. So if you complete, let's say you're graduating this August and you're completing a master's degree, you won't have the same restriction before September 15th, if you complete it before September 15th, to do another master's degree. So anyone who's finished a program before the effective date may still have options to pursue at a lateral or possibly even reverse, but that could be something more scrutinized.
Thank you, Donna. So we have 1 minute left. So I just want to end with this final slide. But before I do that, I would like to thank my colleagues, Lily Zhang, Donna Steinfeld, and Jeremy Sporer, our three leaders in the University of Pennsylvania ISS office. They're amazing. They're very dedicated and very driven to make sure that we will navigate this challenging landscape smoothly. Okay, so I just want to let's give them a big round of applause virtually for their presence today and for being able to engage with you. And we will offer more of these webinars, and we will try our best also to bring advisors. Some advisors are already doing their outreach in different schools. So you will see us a lot. I promise that. Okay, let's go to the last slide. Jeremy, we have no time, so I'm sorry. Let me just finish. So connect with ISSS. We have website. We are updating our website on a daily basis. We will introduce the Duration of Status Resource Center, newsletters, read our newsletters, Instagram. We have the Blue Sky and the Facebook. We will really explore and utilize every single portal and social media so that we can engage and get in touch with you. With that, it's 3 o'clock. Unless, Jeremy, that's a very important point, but I have to say goodbye. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening, wonderful day, wonderful afternoon. See you next time.